Hey folks, Vortex here and welcome to my $35 comparison, which is a bit of an odd number. Obviously a couple of months ago I did a under $20 comparison. So this is if you want to like step up a bit, and obviously some of these are new releases. Three here, all these are $35 on Linsole, and I've got two off camera which I'll get to in a bit, and they're just under 40, and they're all dynamic drivers. That's the point. Because I think under, this kind of 50, under 100, I think single DDs are good. You do get to do nice hybrids. Anyway, just before I get into it, I'll also link two videos in the description which are very useful. One is to check if they're out of phase. If you don't know what that is, watch the video. It's in case it's swapped to you. You know what I mean? Watch the video. It's useful to get an item, and if it sounds strange, it sounds really odd, there might be out of phase. And two, just to see, and one just to check left and right. Like for example, when I received these condensers, the cable the polarity was wrong. So it's good to have these kind of tools. And same when I did the KB Pekka, the actual cable was backwards for channels. So again, it's useful. I'll link them in the description. So anyway, $35. I've got two off camera which are $40. So you got the Tripowin Piccolos, the Blon Hawaii Bad Boy Z300s, and you have the Kiwi Ears Cadenzas. They're all $35. All single dynamic drivers. One of them's a dual, but I'll get to that in a bit off camera. And yeah, obviously all 2-pin. And yeah, so I won't go over the packaging, tips, cables. You can always check the videos for stuff like that. This is just a sound kind of thing, my opinions. None of these are bad, by the way. They're all a little bit different. This is just a step up from like the $15 to $20 bracket, basically. And yeah, so I'm going to overlay a graph now of all these three compared, and it's normalized at 500 hertz. So yeah, I'll overlay that now. Now, as you say, I've normalized at 500. You can also always choose 1000. So yeah, all these are single dynamic drivers. They do have differences in the mid-range, not massively so, just a bit. The bigger differences are either end of the spectrum really. So yeah, left to right bass. Now as you can see, the Piccolo has the least. Now Tripowin's products are normally quite bassy, but not this set. Obviously it is elevated. And they all have that lower mid-range bleed as well, which gives male vocals, in my opinion, a bit more volume. Which is different to one of the models you see at the end. But yeah, they all have elevated bass. They all do it a bit differently. So I like electronic music, and all these three suit what I like. The Piccolo is probably the least what I like out of these. Again, I do like all of them, but to be picky, it's the one I like the least for low end and for comfort, but that's separate kind of topic. Now, bass, these three all have impact for low end. The decay and all these three is good. They all use different driver coatings. Like one's LCP. I think one uses at least beryllium for its coating in part, and one is, I think the Blon is something else. But yeah, all of them are good. To be honest, I'd say I do like elevated low end. I don't like crazy bass monsters because it colours the audio too much. But as you can see, the bass on these is all pretty good. Piccolo has the least. Now, the Z300 probably has the most mid-bass presence. And then it tails off slightly compared to the Cadenza's sub-bass. Now that depends if the music you listen to has sub-bass or much. A mid-bass presence is probably the most, I wouldn't say visible, but probably the most obvious you hear is mid-bass, because more things have mid-bass in the mix, mastered into it, than sub-bass. Obviously we all like a bit of sub-bass, the rumble, but yeah, the Z300 has probably got the most bass, and most you probably notice is the best way to describe it. And then the Cadenza is basically right behind it. And the Piccolo is the least. Like, for what I like for typically electronic is, I like a balanced sound signature with an emphasis, a bit of an elevated low end. and I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, that's pretty much the base. So mid-range on these, quite similar. Now the Piccolo is more mid-forward than the others, so vocals are a touch more forward that I found on the Piccolo than the others. Not always a massive amount, but I think male vocals all sounded kind of similar. There wasn't a big difference, but females was more forward with the Piccolos. Again, not all vocals, depends where the female's frequency, where she sits, because obviously they all have different pitches, different frequency ranges. But from just general usage, the Piccolo is more forward in the mid range, and apart from that, you could probably kind of call it as a V-shape kind of sound. But they all are pretty good mid range. Really, they're not. If they had less bass, it'd probably be a touch cleaner, but that's pretty much the mid range. Now, treble is where these kind of sound a bit more different. Now, the Z300, as you can see, has the least, especially in the gain area. So from, like 2K to 4 to 5K area, it has the least. So using these back to back, it sounds, in comparison to the others, it sounds kind of quite dark. On its own, it doesn't. But when you compare it to these two, it does have a darker presentation. Now, the other two, again, in comparison to these, just sound... It sounds like there's a little bit more going on in the treble. It's a bit more forward. Now, if you listen to these on their own, it's different. But when you go back to back with, these, it's a bit different. But yes, so the treble is, again, on all of it, it's very clear. It just sounds a bit more clearer on the Piccolo and the condensers. They both do females differently. Now, they all have pretty good extension. It's not perfect. It's like the Piccolo probably has the least in some cases. But the other two, they all have pretty... Now, the $20 marks, they have less extension than these. They seem to, when you get to like 8K, 10K kind of area, they lack extension. But these are, I'd say, they use, a step up with driver tech, and it can do a bit more. It can go a bit more. And that's pretty much it. Like, they all do really good. They all just do it differently. Now, again, in comparison, the Z300 sounds dark. If you didn't have the other two and had it on its own, it sounds fine. I used the Z300 first out of these three just before I did the video, and it sounds perfectly fine. But when you use the other two, it does lack it a bit. If you know what I mean. It's that's just my opinion. But yeah, vocals are a little bit more forward on the other two. But then when it goes further up, the Piccolo seems to lack instruments further up. But on the other two, you hear it a bit more. My difference if you use classical music, for example, is you'll probably notice the difference more, especially full orchestras and when there's a lot going on. It'd be probably a bit more forward on the Z300 and the Cadenza, because it has a bit more treble further up. But apart from that, they do have pretty good extension, and sound stages on these is pretty good as well. And that's pretty much it. That's my opinion. None of these are bad. You just have to pick which suits you more. I typically would prefer like the Blon. I don't like too much emphasis in the treble. I like enough. But when you start having too much, it just sounds fatiguing or artificial, because it's boosting stuff where it shouldn't be, in my opinion. And yeah, so that's those. So again, $35 for each, and that's my opinion of those. Now, bonus two. Now, obviously, there's a lot of items have been released, but this is all I have. So, bonus two here. The Moondrop Lan, which is $39.99. And the QKZ Khans, which is the dual dynamic driver. The hardest to drive, well, least sensitive. But dynamic driver, 2 dynamic drivers. The Truth here, 0 would have been a good one in this video, but I don't have it, unfortunately. So yeah, these two are quite different. Again, $40 each. This is probably more similar to the ones I did just. And the Khan's probably the most different. But anyway, I'll put the graph on for these two. So as you can see, definitely in the low end it's very different. Now the Lan has very gradual gain from the mid-range to the bass. For what I like, it's a bit soft on bass, but it follows kind of what Moondrop do with their signatures. Is they're not really that bassy, but they have a forward lower treble kind of presence region. Now these two in the bass is very different. The Khan has a lower mid dip, but then he has that big kind of bump between, you can see 30 and 160, 170 hertz. Now, because it has that mid-range dip, then it shoots up. It gives it more of a, a subwoofer presentation. So it's separating the frequencies more, and because of that, it sounds quite clean when the bass hits, because there's no real bleed or nothing like that. Now, when the Lan hits, it's very soft in its presentation. Now, it does have it, but it's very gradual, and it doesn't tail off towards the sub bass. They do it very differently, but back to back with electronic, the Lan does sound bass light in comparison, but it does sound quite clean because it doesn't really have that much bass. Now, yeah, very different presentation for electronic music. I prefer the Khans. Some people who like really clean sound signatures, no bleed, the Lan is the one for you, and it's easier to power basically. Now mid-range is really clean on the Lans, and it's a bit more mid-forward at the top. The Lan is probably technically the better mids, I'd say, in my opinion, because it doesn't have that weird dip down the bottom. But on the whole, the Lan is the cleanest signature. It's probably the most consistent. And yeah, the Lan has the cleanest mid-range between the two, which is probably the better pick. But I like the Khan because it's different with its tuning, especially the bass. And yeah, obviously it depends on what you listen to, or what, if you play games with it, films, music, whatever. And now the treble. Now the Lan follows kind of normal, I say, frequency response, which is getting quite common. So it's a gradual gain into the treble. It has that shelf up to like 5k, and then it gradually rolls off. It has kind of a similar response that the cheaper models do. Obviously you could check the video for that, like under $20, but the Khan gains much later into the treble. I prefer that. It makes vocals a bit softer, but sometimes you do see like the 4k lump. Now sometimes you feel that it's a little bit fatiguing. Now I prefer the treble of the actual Khans. The Khans, it's a little bit better. It has a little, as you can see, it extends better because the DDs are split. Instead of the Lan trying to do all of it, the Khan can do both. Now, I do like the Khan. The only thing I would do is to probably EQ out that dip in the lower mid-range and probably take it a little bit off the 4K and then leave it alone. Now, the Khan sounds wider. As you can see, these aren't accurate after 10k, but around 8 to 10, there's more going on with the Khans, and it does have that better stage, so it sounds bigger. The Lan sounds similar to the more budget models, apart from with a better driver, so its technical performance is a bit better than the cheaper models, but it follows the same kind of pattern, is the best way to describe it. And apart from that, they're kind of cool. I do like the Khans at these two the best. Bit of EQ will make it really good, kind of good. And I'll probably end it there. It's about nearly 14 minutes long. So I do like these. This more belongs in the previous one. I think this should have been $35 really to match the other two. And this $40 is obviously a good kind of price. I do like the build of it. It's kind of like what Truth Ears do. You know, you can make it, see, it's semi-transparent. You can see a DD. Good set. The most different. This is more similar with the others. Everything I've shown in this video, obviously put these here. They're all good sets. They're all Rex. You just choose what you want. For day-to-day use, I do like the Blons because it's just an easier listen. But these pair here do sound more detailed than these. And these kind of falls into this kind of set, and this is if you want a kind of good stage, nice treble. Probably not as good mid-range as these, but it has that good subwoofer kind of bass effect, which is kind of cool. And I end it there, yeah. So if you know anything particular, let me know in the comments. And after this video, I'll probably be taking a few weeks off. If you don't watch this far, I will do a community post. So yeah, if you know anything in particular, let me know in the comments. Nice sets for 35. I love to have tried the KZ planar, the PR2s, the Hawaii Bad Boy collab. I don't have it, so yeah, I'd have included it with this set because it was $39. Anyway, that's it. So yeah, guys, I'll see you in the future. Just had to take a few weeks off, and yeah, take care.